Welcome to the Speak with People podcast, where we believe that healthy communication is the key to unlocking your leadership potential. We are the go-to resource for leaders looking to greatly improve their communication skills, whether it's one-on-one interactions, team settings, public speaking, or digital communication. By improving these skills, leaders can create stronger connections and drive positive change within their organizations. Each and every episode, we sit down with experts from various fields from around the world, just like you're grabbing a coffee with them, to dive into real practical conversations. Our goal is to help you transform your communication skills so you can lead more effectively, build stronger relationships, and make a lasting impact. So go grab your favorite drink, settle in, and let's learn together. Well, how do you communicate your personal brand in a way that builds trust, attracts referrals, and expands your influence? Too many professionals just maybe leave this to chance, and it costs them relationships, credibility, and opportunities. Well, welcome to the Speak with People podcast. We believe great leaders just don't speak. They connect, inspire, and lead through healthy communication. I'm your host, Jason Raitz, and today we're joined by Rob Miles for the second time on the podcast. Only, I want to say two, maybe we've had two repeat guests, so this is very exciting. Rob's an expert. I've gotten to know him over the last couple of years, watched him on LinkedIn from afar, absolutely love how he leads, casts vision, and how he helps shape so many different financial professionals for how they grow their businesses and their practices. And what I love about Rob is his deep passion for communication skills, especially listening. So I can't wait to dive into this. So if you've ever struggled with the question, what makes you different, or wondered why your message isn't landing, today is the episode for you. Rob, welcome back to the Speak with People podcast.
Great. Thanks for the invite. Honored to be, I think you said one of two to repeat visit. So I'll take that as a victory.
I love it. I love it. Well, hey, your episode in 2024 was one of our highest listened to episodes, believe it or not. And so that was exciting. And so it's always great to have a guest back. For our listeners who maybe missed that one, could you just give us the 30,000 foot view of your story, who you are, what you do, what's kind of got you to this place?
Yeah, absolutely. I work for Truist. I'm head of national sales for a wholesale division, which includes several lines of business, including wealth and commercial banking and such. My role every day is to help people be better at what they do. Our advisors, our teams, our support professionals, and obviously today's topic is communication. That's a heavy part of it. But more broadly, it's how to make them be better at what they do in terms of service to their clients and providing advice. That episode, we talked a lot about listening and the power of listening and the importance of strategies that we use to connect and allow clients and would-be clients to share their story, share what their concerns are, and there's strategies we use to do that, which are very passionate for me, and those I've worked with across the last 15 years would know that. So I'm excited to be here, and I know we're going to dive into the communications topic, which again is something that, I think you'd agree, Jason, is something everyone wants to do well. But if they look back, like how much time they spend thinking or practicing or refining is usually relatively low. It's kind of an assumed skill that I got to this level of success, which is great. But like any great athlete, how do you get better? And how do you challenge yourself to fill the gaps that may exist, or maybe you don't even know exist? And I've heard that through my career as well. Blind spots is what one advisor referred to it. Help me find my blind spots. And this is typically a very big blind spot for people because, again, my hypothesis is that professionals just assume they're really good at it and don't put effort or practice into it.
Wow, that's profound. I absolutely love that. We think of it so often as an assumed skill. And again, and sometimes we don't want people to mess with it because it's like, wait a minute, I've been doing this the same way for a long time.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Maybe just leave me alone on this one. I love that. Especially as we think of, maybe advisors, wholesalers, sales professionals who are, client faced. I mean, there are there's millions of us out there. And so one of the ways we can stay top of mind with our potential clients and our clients is to build our brand. And I think sometimes many of us have this idea that our brand is just a logo on our shirt. But our personal brand is so much about communication. Maybe dive into that a little bit for us. Open that up for us.
Yeah, there's a framework or perspective I have here, which is kind of a three-legged stool. It's what is your personal brand? How do you communicate your value to a client or a teammate that you might be working with? And then how do you introduce the team that you're a part of? You think of those three major areas over the years. I've really dove into each one of those is super important, and any one that fails could be detrimental to your success and or your effectiveness. So to your personal brand question, I'll turn it back to you. Like, let's think of a brand that you love. Like, what's a brand that you love, Jason? A consumer brand that people would know.
Yeah, I'm pretty addicted to Apple.
Yeah, Apple. Like, when you say the word Apple, what kind of inspires you? What kind of words come to your mind?
Beautiful, sleek, fast, always works.
Yeah, and that's the simplicity of it, the superior design. I think millions of people would give the same answer, and so Apple's done a pretty good job with their brand. And we could play this game all day. Brands that people love like Costco and Chick-fil-A comes to mind, Trader Joe's comes to mind, Ritz-Carlton comes to mind, the Mayo Clinic comes to mind. So, to speed up our conversation, what I ask clients then is, well, what is your personal brand? Like, you don't have a logo. You don't have a marketing budget. You don't have a big sign on the highway. You don't have celebrities endorsing your product or your company name that people associate it with, like Nike would have their athletes. So that's the frame is, what is your personal brand? And there's exercises we do at our firm, but just more broadly for your listeners, what are 3 or 5 words that describe you? You said beautiful, easy to use. Like, if you think of yourself, got a piece of paper out and just said, hey, what are the 5 words that people use when they hear my name or when I walk into a room? And, I guess what I would say here is, the way I think about it is, there's 5 words like in a bubble above your head that literally walk around with you. And in a sales organization or any service organization or team environment, that bubble sometimes arrives in a room well before you do. And sometimes that brand arrives so early that you don't get invited to the meeting. Because if those words are challenging, like, tough to work with, or overbearing, or arrogant, or, not doesn't get back to me on time, whatever that may be, someone's like, yeah, we probably don't need to include that person in this opportunity, or we don't really need that person in here. Versus the brand that's positive walks in and it's like, oh, we definitely need to have Cindy or Susan or Robert or James, whatever the name is. Oh, we definitely need to invite them. They provide a lot of analysis. They provide a lot of interesting ideas. They're so passionate about what they do. Those words that people use, that's your brand. And so, that's kind of how I think about it.
Boy, that's so good. And it's so fascinating because, I think of all the different times. So I have a client, he's a financial advisor, really looking to try to do so much of this. And we were together at a networking event. And so, probably 100 people in a room, and, all the introverts are like, oh, I can't stand this. Even in my 20s, love those rooms, now almost 50. I'm like, okay, I love this. I have to keep telling myself I love it. Well, anyways, he asked me to give him some critique, and he introduced himself, and he said, my name is Joe. I'm a financial advisor. And that was it. And then quickly everybody just moved on. And so I think about, you talk about these 5 words in this brand, how much more powerful if somebody had that framework to then be able to build that, here's what I am, here's what I do. And so maybe talk to us for, about that kind of introductory piece for a second. So we've got those words, we're starting to build that. How can I use that now to, stay top of mind with other people?
And that's that second leg of the stool: value proposition, value promise, which can always get people like angry. Like, I don't want to do that. That sounds so salesy or marketing. But before I go there, let me back up real quick. You mentioned introverts and extroverts, and there's this sort of hypothesis that people who are extroverted might be better at this or easier at this, and that could be in some levels easy to understand for some people. However, it's not. When you look at behavioral styles, we use the DISC model here at Truist Wealth and across our Truist businesses to help people understand that people behave and communicate and need to communicate in different ways. And so part of the personal branding is to have confidence in yourself. So, for example, before we go to the value prop part of it, if that personal brand for someone is thoughtful, diligent, empathetic, even relatively quiet or shy, that doesn't mean bad. It means you need to position yourself great. You need to position yourself in that way. You need to understand that your brand could be, I bring in Jim because he's so thoughtful. He's the one that listens the best. He's the one that captures the best notes.
Oof.
He's the one that gets to know the client in a level of depthness that I can't get to know them. They provide an empathetic and or caring persona that is critical to the advice we're giving. And so part of what I do every day is, as I said earlier, making people better at what they do, is to remove that doubt, like to understand their brand. And then where they need to enhance it or protect it or change it, we can talk about that. So that's one thing I wanted to point out to people listening is, you might think, oh, the people who are gregarious and outgoing and can talk to anyone that they ever meet. Yeah, that might be an easier skill for some people, but it doesn't necessarily mean their brand's excellent, because every brand item has some negativity to it as well. The easiest one is, do you want to work with a confident professional or an arrogant one? No one would say arrogant, right? But
Right.
confident sounds really good.
Yeah.
And there's a fine line between that, right?
Yep.
So that's that. Okay, your question on value and how to sort of take that, how to think about that. Once you understand your brand, then you can communicate your value. To your point of the financial advisor you're talking about, the most common answer to the question, what do I do? Or what do you do? Sorry, is name and job title and company.
Yep.
I am Bob Smith from X financial firm, and I'm a financial advisor, or I'm a banker, whatever that may be.
Yep.
That's not the question.
Right.
The question was, what do you do? And it takes a lot of thought to really answer that question. And what I mean by that is you have to internalize it to the point of belief. So when someone says, oh, this is just like an elevator pitch. No. That's not what this is. That's an awful thing to think about. What I'm talking about is the core of how do you describe the value that you bring to someone upon meeting them. And that's the question, what do you do? And my earlier point of people don't work on this or practice this, that if you get a question like, what do you do? You're more likely to do what your client said, just sort of answer it like, oh, I'm Cindy at X firm, versus a very thoughtful, passionate answer. You also may just start to do what I call like the prayer for hope. It's like you look up at the sky because your brain is now thinking, what do I say? Mm-hmm. And therefore you don't sound confident. You don't sound you're in it to win it. You don't sound ready. And I'm sure you could tell me more as you do more research in this space, but our parents are absolutely correct. The first impression is hard to change. And in a professional setting, you missed an opportunity to set the stage for how you come across. And so I'll stop there. I can go back and forth a little bit here, but that's the general frame that I try to get people to think differently about the importance of this. And to, what I might ask them is, how much time, literally per week, do you spend on this?
Yeah.
The answer is usually zero, because back to the assumption point, people don't schedule time to practice communication or practice introductions or practice my opening or practice, I'm meeting prospects later today that I've been looking to get in front of for 6 months. And when they're going to ask me, what do I do? How am I going to handle this conversation? They just go to that meeting, assuming that they are going to have a good answer. And they may work. But my point is consistency and preparation will breed excellence.
Wow. I heard an interview once. Someone asked Tiger Woods, for those of our listeners who don't know, maybe the greatest golfer of all time, said, what's it like to be able to putt and be great at it? And he kind of had that tiger pause, and he looked at the reporter and said, well, if it means, 1,000 putts before 6 a.m., I was just he just kind of, went into it, but it just ties into exactly what you're saying. We just wing it so often, and we think, I'm just meeting a client, or, I think of those moments where, when my kids were little and I'm walking on the soccer field, getting to the practice or the game or whatever, and I meet the client on the field and they're like, oh, Jason, you got to meet my friend who's standing right there. Because it's not just, during the 9 to 5 that I'm going to have those opportunities to introduce myself, and I've got to be ready. Like I've got to, in all those different scenarios. And even if you take 5-10 minutes, to just walk through every week, okay, this is how I'm going to introduce myself. That's just huge. Do you find sometimes leaders, when it comes to articulating some of this, They just need some help with the clarity standpoint. They just start to like go on and then trying to figure out how to shrink it. What are some of the most
Yeah,
common mistakes you see with, professionals who are trying to get, these things pretty
yeah,
clear? Yeah.
yeah. Common mistakes too long, right? It's just too long. People's attention spans are short, but in general, no one wants to have to sit down when they ask you what do you do or tell me about yourself. Like they don't want to have to
Right.
rest.
Right.
I think another thing people do is they use a lot of buzzwords,
Uh,
and so and they almost sound like a marketing commercial. Like
mhm.
I'm here to change the course of your life and passionately support you. Right? It's something that human beings would not say. So I
Right.
like to tell our teams here at Truist, thinking about how do the clients, let's call them clients, two clients you're trying to serve, how do they talk about at home? Like, how do they talk about their life at home? So talk like that. Like, talk about how you're going to help them, assess and understand the goals they're going to make. You're going to have them really look around the corner and, challenge themselves to look around the corner what might they need to prepare for, or they might be a challenge to them in the future they need to get ready for. So that's one mistake. Another one is the ums,
Oh
ahs,
yeah. Fillers.
thoughts, filler words, knows, I think, maybe. Um, the weakness of those types of dialogue sort of sink you no matter what you say. And I think, one thing I do when I'm in training is, I have someone that's doing this and it's very serious, it's very robotic, it's very marketing. And then I start telling them some jokes and asking them some funny questions. They start smiling and they start answering. And then I ask the group we're with to say, hey, what did you like better? Like, what person did you like? The stiff, bored, thought he was reading a script, or the person like this person over here who was authentic and nice and smiled and you could tell that likes what they do. Like, what would you prefer to work
Wow.
with? So those are some mistakes there. And I think to your point of winging it, that's really the mistake, is people are winging it. And there are some research I've read out there that say, professionals tend to wing it more than they used to. I mean,
Mm,
we're a wing it society in some way, right?
yeah.
So the lesson to people listening, right, is if you prepare, if you are ready, if you are strongly convinced in what you're saying, you will stick out from the crowd. All of us are professionals. We interview people. Just think about an interview. You interview someone who goes on and doesn't have any point, and they clearly haven't thought about their story or what value they bring to your business, versus someone who has. Who are you going to advance in the interview process?
Right.
It's the same thing our clients thinking, right? It's the same thing. Like, uh, so you have to be really ready for it. And those are some of the common mistakes. And that obviously leads to what's successful, which we can talk about.
Wow. We talk a lot in this space about staying top of mind, right? You want to stay top of mind with
Yeah.
people. Those of us who prospect a lot, either we're sending emails, we're calling, we're,
Mhm.
trying to build relationships. There's that balance, right? From like, oh, I really do believe I have something that can help, but I don't want to, overwhelm them, bug them with it, but that balance of staying top of mind. And I think what you've brought here is so important, because if you're prepared and you're ready for those moments, when you do get them, you'll really stay top of mind because you're clear, you're succinct, you're memorable. I mean, those things are
Yep.
just, so incredibly important. So, what advice would you give, to the listener who is in that prospecting mode, always, building, reaching, does the message change at all? Does it stay the same? What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, I think it's an assumption made that you believe what you're doing, right? So getting really around what are you trying? You're trying to help someone.
Mm,
I think I forget if it's your podcast, but I talk a lot about the nobility of the business and the advice that we're able to give. And you're out there to help people. Right? So you're going to be confident in this, what you're offering and what you're presenting, and your belief that you could help that person. Secondly, back to being memorable. I love that term. It's being memorable. Are you consistent, proactive, and is it just about getting something, or are you truly building a relationship over time where you earn that trust? And obviously, we all know sales cycles take time. Thirdly, I'd say people can tell. I mean, At the end of the day, if I like to think of this, and I use this analogy in my coaching and working with teams, is that let's say you have this prospect meeting, okay, or client meeting, and it's two people, husband, wife, etc. And after the meeting concludes, as they walk to their car, they will be interviewed by the news. And the news will ask something like, was it worth your time? Did you find the person prepared? Did you learn something from this person that you haven't learned from another provider? Would you send your most loved ones to this person? Are you glad that you took 90 minutes off of work and drove into the city or drove across town to meet this person? The answers to those questions will tell you how successful you were.
Right.
And obviously, I don't think anyone has news stations sitting outside their conference rooms, but they truly do, because that is the conversation that those two human beings are going to have as they walk back to their car.
Wow.
You just won't be able to listen to it.
Right.
And what I think about is we are relatively, this could be challenged, a relatively polite society. So some people, when they're asked, hey, thanks for the time, great meeting, really good, follow up with you. Oh, thank you. Everyone feels good. But then when they walk back to their car, the honest conversation might be, that was a waste of our time.
Yep.
Or, I didn't get to say a word. Did you understand all the acronyms this person was using?
Right.
Do you think they were prepared? Like, they kept confusing us with someone else. That's kind of how it goes. And so I think about those points all go back to the hypothesis that you must be prepared, you must be confident, you must have practiced and thought through what the value that you bring is, regardless of your industry. Financial services, accounting, legal, all of us, maybe some of us have done home projects where you bring contractors in. You immediately dismiss a couple because of the way they behave, communicate, they can't articulate, and you don't know if they're the greatest contractor in the history of time.
Right.
But you're making that judgment that I didn't enjoy this interaction. That person didn't seem prepared. They kind of didn't seem interested in me. They didn't ask me any questions about what we're trying to accomplish with this renovation. They just sort of mailed it in and thought they were going to get the business. So, I like to use these analogies because everyone sort of tends to understand them and in some level can apply it to their business.
Wow, that's powerful. Just the thought of thinking, okay, after this meeting, what's the news crew saying? Because you're just so right. Once they get to their car, that's profound. Okay, talk to us for a second, because many of us, we work for you work for a company. The company has a brand. Here's the products, those kind of things. For our other folks listening. And so, how do you merge the two? Separate the two? How do they communicate together? And so, how do you kind of bridge that gap?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the industry, but for us, here at Truist, we're a purpose-driven organization. We're here to build better lives and better communities, and that really aligns within the space that we're in, providing advice and counsel to people. So we're aligned to that brand concept of being purpose-driven, because all of our advice is purpose-driven, which is why we believe in the power of listening and understanding our clients at a deeper level, and then bringing the right teammates with different backgrounds, different experiences, different levels of advice to the table based on what we've heard, and then have a very robust and thorough planning process to make sure all parts of that are covered. And then, of course, the constant review or proactivity of reaching out, because life does change. That is Truist Wealth in a nutshell. Obviously, on the personal side, there's the personal attributes and the personal team, perspectives and how they implement that. But, you obviously want to align. I think you want to align with that. But on a deeper level, there is a human level here of that's all good. But on a personal level, like as a representative of that institution or my team, do you feel I'm going to provide that to you? And at least in the financial services space, what am I saying, or what am I presenting, or what am I offering to you that would make you share with me the most confidential data and thoughts and issues that maybe anyone knows about you?
Wow.
I would even think about spouses. Like, I may share, Jason, you're my financial wealth advisor. I may share some thoughts about things that I don't even tell my spouse.
Right.
Especially in times of challenge, right?
Yep.
In terms of family relationships that are strained or such, that has a whole other layer to it. But if you think about that, and you come in and say, I'm an advisor at X firm, why would I share anything with you?
Yeah.
I might congratulate your parents that you have a nice job, but there's nothing you said and nothing you've inspired in me to say, hey, this person can help me. And if that's linked obviously to your firm, it's very powerful that your brand backs you up and your go-to-market strategy backs you up. So to use an example everyone understand, if you're a doctor at the Mayo Clinic, you're providing a Mayo Clinic experience. If you're someone who's opening up a Chick-fil-A as an operator, you're providing the Chick-fil-A experience. But in that institution or in your store, you're creating the culture, the people, the feedback, the energy, the positivity that's needed to deliver that. And so that's again, great brands tend to do that really, really well. And it's really, really hard, which is why so few people and or companies can really, really knock it out of the park.
Wow. I love that. The last time we did this, you interviewed, you said something that I was you'll get it in the mail, but my new book came out this week. And so, but I actually quoted you in it because you said, we can't forget that we're in a noble business. And just what you said. I mean, people are sharing parts of, so intimate details. And if we view them as just another check mark or another transaction, our brand is not going to last. And that stuck with me. I've probably used that quote. I mean, sorry, it's going to sound like I'm a fanboy and I'm, kissing your butt a little bit, but I've used that quote in, I don't know, 30, 40 trainings with firms all over the place. Cause I'm like, we can't forget this. It's so huge.
And it's forgotten every day.
Yeah.
Right. It just is. And the ability of the business, the ability of the advice we give is, I think, something I obviously talk about a lot, but it's a good reminder. It's a good litmus test, right? Any job, any day-to-day business can get routine and or you have pressure on you, and et cetera, and you're tired, you have things going on in your life. But, another way I try to enforce that is, as an advisor or any business, you might have hundreds of client interactions and meetings in a given calendar year, but that one client may have two with you.
Right.
So is your 1% good that day?
Wow.
Right? For that person. I mean, just like you wouldn't want your heart surgeon to have a bad day. You want them to be prepared and ready and have done their work. So, it's in a world where we don't talk about it enough. I think you can really stick out when you can get to that level. And to the points we're making, the one way you are noble is by being prepared and clearly articulating the value that you bring to encourage people to allow you to provide that advice.
Wow.
And that sort of it leads to it, which again, back to the value proposition piece we were talking about, being able to develop a true bullseye, if you will, bullseye of what your business is. And so versus job title and company versus, what I do every day is help clients like yourselves look around the corner to avoid the errors that people make in their wealth journey.
Okay. So Rob, there's so much out there when it comes to the importance of story and learning how to tell stories, listen to stories, capture stories. Talk about it, especially for advisors, especially for sales professionals. How important is it to be able to tap into the power of story? Because sometimes I still hear things like, well, I don't have time to learn how to tell a story or, use stories. And so talk to us a little bit about just the power of story.
Well, to your point, storytelling is an art. It is a trained skill. There's lots of information out there, but I get your point. It's a lot of work for someone to maybe try to get comfortable there. But that aside for a second, like, why does it work? I mean, people just like stories. They just do. And so if you think of TED Talks and things like that, you notice how they start, right, Jason, right into the story. They don't give a lot of background or just start right into it. So I think that's, first of all, it works. I think for advisors or any sales professional, your client base will understand stories much easier than maybe detailed talk or analysis or trying to overwhelm them with your intelligence. So I always advise our teams to have stories prepared that are relevant to the audience you're talking to. Right? So if someone asks you, hey, have you ever worked with someone before on preparing them for a podcast? you, Jason, would be able to tell us many stories. Like, well, I've been leading podcasts for years, and this is what I've seen. And let me tell you a story of someone I met that was on my podcast, and he started here and he ended here, and these are the types of skills we worked on, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that applies for almost everything. And I think analogies are probably a synonym. There are stories, analogies, depending on what perspective you take. So if you use analogies, like I talk about here, the Mayo Clinic of Wealth Management, what I mean by that story is how can we as an advisory firm mirror the integrated team-based advice in the medical profession that the Mayo provides and, analogize it to how do you provide that in the financial services side. And that resonates not only with our teammates, but with clients and prospects. So again, very, very difficult to get started. But once I think you get like anything in life, some momentum, it's all about being prepared. And so at the end of the day, you might end up with 3, 4, 5 stories, analogies, etc., that you can use repeatedly in messaging to clients and prospects. And therefore, it's authentic and it's natural as opposed to searching for the story in the moment.
Boy, that's so good. And you nailed it again about the preparation, because I think sometimes we just sort of wing our stories. But if you put some thought into, okay, in each situation, I have, kind of my go-to story, that'd be powerful. Maybe talk to us
Well,
a
what
little bit
happens there,
about,
Jason, sorry to interrupt you, what happens there is when you don't prepare, your story is weak.
ooh,
It's high level. It's not, there's no detail. There's no enunciate. There's no point sometimes. So it's like, let me tell you a story on the fly of, I had a client recently, he and she did this and, and then this versus, hey, let me tell you a story. I had a client come in recently. Their biggest challenge is they wanted to retire early and buy a business. So let me just tell you a story about that. They came to me and they asked for some advice. I did something different. I took them around to see different people to ask them about how that transition went. And you go from there versus a higher level story that provides no value. And so that's why preparation is so hard. It actually makes you more authentic and more real. Where some people go, I don't want to sound so staged. It's a complete opposite reaction I have when people ask me that question.
oh, I love that. Are there a couple of, maybe lanes, that we should have some stories, prepared in, specifically thinking in the advisor world?
Yes, advisor sales. Well, the story of why you got in the business. Why do you do what you do? What is there a story there? Um, I think there's stories about the different types of clientele, or regardless of your business, you can be a car salesman and have stories about families that buy a certain vehicle for certain safety reasons and why they did that. I think there's a story that what your advice model is or what you're delivering to someone. A story about why what you're delivering has value. I think stories of overcoming challenge. A lot of clients in any industry have challenge. So a client came to me with a challenge or a difficult moment, and then stories of winning. What
Mm,
have you done to help people win that mirror the people that you're talking to? And so back to the earlier point I was making of relevancy. If you ask me a question about, tell me a story about a business you've helped, and you're in the grocery business, and I start spending 10 minutes talking about airplane manufacturing, that isn't relevant. It's
right.
like, what are you talking about? And so same thing with any business that you're in, the story needs to be relevant to the audience. So that's sort of the with them, what's in it for me. People want to hear something that resonates with them. So that's why having multiple examples or stories are important. Again, that you're prepared so you can massage them and use them in different audiences that are relevant to who you're talking to, and they can get something out of it.
Right. Right. Oh, wow. Wow. I love that. So talk to us for a second. I mean, especially advisors, financial professionals, uh, folks with, a good amount of letters after their name, they've studied, they've gone through, so much. They have the wealth knowledge, they're experts. How do we sometimes, translate that into simple language? I mean, we've talked about stories, we've talked about the power of all this, but if we can't, if we
Yeah,
overwhelm our client with,
yeah.
this and that and this, so how do we, is there like a, a funnel or a tunnel that we need to kind of, translate it through?
It's a good question. I mean, generally, you're not going to overwhelm someone with your intelligence.
Mm,
So all the letters and stuff, they're nice. You're prepared. But again, it just goes back to what's in it for me. Like, so what? So if someone tells, if an advisor, again, regardless of industry, starts to tell me that they're the best in their industry, they have this award, that award, they've been nominated for this, they appear in these magazines. My only answer when I'm coaching someone is typically, your mom and dad must be so proud of you. But what's in it for me? Like, how do I benefit from this?
Yes.
Right. And so talking your language about, is one. And two, people in general are afraid to simplify things because in their mind, it sounds too simple. So like if I'm providing advice or a business proposition, the more complex it sounds sometimes, the more I feel I have value that I'm adding. I think it's the complete opposite. Simplifying the complex is not easy. It doesn't make it easy. And so how do you boil down things in a way that confidently give the person you're talking to a perspective on your ability, your background, and how to help them? So a great back to stories, a cardiovascular surgeon doesn't come in and show you video of exactly where he's going to cut or she's going to do, right? They give you the high levels with some confidence and they explain it in a way that makes sense. This surgery's risk rate is very low. Its outcomes are very positive. I expect your loved one to, over the next few months, be as good as new, if you will, and have a new lease on life with energy. And all of a sudden, the story starts to sound a little more comforting while also giving you confidence in the professional's ability to deliver that. And so, again, I would close this sort of thought process here with complexity doesn't always make you sound smart.
So good. So good. So you've spent, much of your career, financial world. If there are a few lessons that you could give our audience about, that longevity, that, staying in the industry, what are a few of those, big lessons that you've learned that have really kind of helped guide you as you just, now I'm trying not to say you're old, but I'm trying to say you're very seasoned. You
Yeah.
have,
Yeah. People are very creative these days to remind me that I'm older now.
Yes.
Especially some of the people that work in our office, it's like, well, I wasn't born in the year 2000. Anyway, I guess I'm not sure the answer to that other than you got to love what you do and you got to have some type of meaning to it. So I spend a lot of time thinking about that. Like I just got a note from one of our advisors. It was very heartfelt, very thankful. We had bonded over something and he was a recent training of mine. And, I print those, and I look at them and I save them. And over the years, that's sort of my metric of my doing something of value. The other point I'd make is being humble. This is a learning process, and new things are coming at me. New things come at everybody. Like, how do you evolve? How do you not stay in place? So, my team and we like to talk about iterating, and we're never done. And we're constantly improving what we can do, not being comfortable. Like once you're comfortable, it tends to be over. And I've worked with a lot of advisors and salespeople in that area of, you're 30 years into this, and you have 5 years maybe left in your business in terms of your plan. And how do you make that last 5 years the most successful, impactful, rewarding, emotionally fulfilling 5 years of your career? There is no rule book to say it has to be coasted into a finish line. So those 2 points about, loving what you're doing, evolving, and running through the tape, if you will.
Wow, boy, that's cool. And you said something that was so profound. I remember listening to John Maxwell years ago, talk about those seasons that are low and all the struggles are coming and you're trying to figure it out. And love that you save that note from the advisor. He talked about how those are kind of like hot poker, to a fire. Like those low seasons, pull them out and remind, okay, hey, this is the difference we've made. Here's where we're coming. And it's just powerful to be able to do that.
Yeah. I mean, also, as good as it feels, it also gives you some lessons of like what resonates.
Yep.
And what doesn't. And to your earlier question on stories, a lot of people I've worked with over the years, they refer back to the terms, the words I've used, and the phrases I put together that they can still repeat to other people. One of them, for example, is where I was talking with people who serve ultra high net worth clients, advisors. And sometimes you can be intimidated by them, of course, right? But it may sound crass. I don't mean to make it to sound this way, but billionaires have problems too.
Yeah.
And some of the advisors I've worked with years later still remember that as a source of reminding them that they're in the advice business, reminding them that the human beings that they're in front of, regardless of wealth level, have some commonalities and challenges in life that we all have: disease, death, tragedy, guilt, whatever that may be, poor relationships with their children, or difficult marital relationships, business failure. Those are all kinds of things that, regardless of your wealth, sometimes you're going to have, or you will have. So again, I think the storytelling, the words that you use, if you make them memorable, people tend to remember them, and therefore you have a longer impact with them.
Boy, that's good. We kind of started this way. We'll kind of wrap this way, but I told you I've used that quote you used on the last time you were on the Speak to People podcast about how we're in a noble business. Like people is our business. Maybe talk to us, share a little bit of wisdom about how to stay in that framework, because we get so busy, right? I mean, meeting after meeting after meeting, and then the emails, the dings keep coming in. How do we keep, in that framework of, hey, this is noble. I get to serve these people. I get to be a part of their life. I get to advise.
Yeah. Let's be honest, right? It doesn't always feel that way, right? The day-to-day work life and activities. I think it's something we've been talking about. It's just constantly reminding yourself, realizing that you have to step back and zoom out a little bit. There's an analogy: if you're staring at a painting, you see one thing, and you zoom all the way out, and you see another.
Yep.
So when you zoom out, the progress that you're making, the people that you're impacting, in the day-to-day may not feel it sometimes. So just trying to zoom out. And then, from a leadership perspective, I believe, and I do a lot of leadership coaching now too, and with our leaders, and I was just doing that this week, so it's recency bias, but, are you gaining followership? So if you're truly doing great work and you truly are a great leader, whether you're serving a client or whether you're managing teams or you're a coach of a sports team, if you're gaining followership, you'll feel it, because people will follow you. They will start to use your work. They start to come to you for advice. And so I try to think about that a lot. Like, am I gaining followership in the sense of the ideas and the work that I'm doing? Are people, are they using it? Are they finding it of value? Are they coming back to me with, this has really improved my performance, or this has really improved my job, or it's led me to a new career opportunity? So, followership is something that I think a lot about, and I think leaders should think a lot about too. And that if they can gain followership, their impact increases.
Oh, powerful. There's a reason why your episode last year was one of our highest downloaded. I mean, this is just great. And next week I keynote Regions National Conference for their financial advisors. So this has given me, tons of fuel and excitement as well. Leaders are learners. And so we're building this online database for leaders, professionals to kind of get new ideas, find new resources. Is there a speaker recently that you've heard that, maybe a specific speaker or a talk that you just go, oof, everyone's got to check out this speaker?
Not recently. I go back to there's that one about, I'm blanking on his name, the former Navy SEAL that was responsible for taking down Osama bin Laden. I think it's Make Your Bed. Right. I saw that book in my office the other day, and I'm planning to reread it. But I've seen some clips of it all over social media all the time, and I guess that's one of those you can reread all the time, right?
I love it.
And then there's the other book and TED Talk, The Last Lecture, by the Carnegie Mellon professor who died of cancer. One of the more phenomenal speeches you'll ever watch. And the book is equally as good. So those are two things that kind of in the go back to and read every so often. To your earlier point of the nobility part of it, read that, and your nobility focus will increase.
Oof. Rob, thank you again for your words. Thank you for being so generous with your wisdom, and really appreciate you coming back on the podcast as well. Can't wait for this to air, and I know it will be a giant help, resource, encouragement to our listeners. So thank you again.
Well, same to you, and I'm sure my mother will listen 1,000 times, so that might spike up the ratings a little bit.
I love it. I love it. Thanks again. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Speak with People podcast. It means the world to us when you share this episode. Thanks for liking, subscribing, or following the podcast. That really does help the podcast get into more ears and into more leaders listening. Also, don't forget, we have 2 exciting resources for you. The first is go to Facebook and join the Speakers Group. This is a community designed for leaders who want to grow their communication skills. Also, go to speakwithpeople.com/skills library to access the Communication Skills Library. It is an online resource chock filled with resources that will inspire you and transform you and grow your communication skills. Thanks again for being a part of the listening community. We cannot wait for the next episode.